Welcome back. You're watching Morning Prime, and this is On Target, looking at matters security and diplomacy here in Africa and the entire world as well. I'm holding court this morning with Dr. Simeon Sungi, who is the Associate Professor of Criminal Justice at the University, let me just use USIU. That is University International, well, it's not, it's United States, it's not coming, United States International University. In the morning, sometimes things will not really roll out from your tongue smoothly. And we have also Dr. Peter Bierejak, all the way from Washington, USA. He is the president of Revive South Sudan. We have also Ahmed Hashi, who is a Horn of Africa analyst, and he's also governance expert, and Dr. Hassan Hanenje, who is the director of the Horn Institute. Let's continue with the conversation pace. Now we want to just gravitate to matters Ethiopia. And we know last week, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced he was heading to the front lines to lead combat operations and transferred executive powers to Deputy Prime Minister Demeke Mekonnen. Two celebrity athletes, Fisia Lelisa and Haile Gebrselassie, declared they will join the fight to defend the city. The Prime Minister's apparent willingness to seek martyrdom in battle has inspired tens of thousands of volunteers drawn from his hardline, One Ethiopia support base, to undergo hasty military training and dig trenches around the capital in anticipation of a ferocious but familiar grand finale. The war and to death martial paradigm has a long pedigree in Ethiopia's blood-drenched political history. Emperors waged war without quarter and died in battle. It was either conquest or death. PM Abiy's politics, rhetoric, posture and self-belief seem almost eerily designed to reprise the country's dark history. And this is where I want to hear what you have to say on this particular martyrdom, because everyone was shocked. If he says, yes, now I'm donning the military regalia, I'm going down to the trenches. If I die, let me die for Ethiopia. Dr. Peter Bierejak.
Well, you see, it's very interesting to watch the situation in Ethiopia. And indeed, you make a very relevant parallels. Abiy is trying to imitate the behavior of previous Ethiopian emperors who led the war and went to battles and came back either with victory or died in battle. I think at the same time, the way the conflict has unfolded has been particularly graphic. Has been a lot of atrocities have been committed on both sides. The country is being severely damaged. A lot of people are being killed. Heinous atrocities are being committed on both sides. And I think it's important at some point for Prime Minister Abiy and the leaders of the TPLF to think about ending this conflict through political negotiations and solving it peacefully. And I applaud the efforts that are being exerted by the former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and also the efforts that Kenya is putting in place. I think there is a need for Prime Minister and the TPLF leaders to really calm down the rhetoric. Some of the rhetoric coming out of Addis Ababa is very concerning. It's clearly on the borderline of inciting the population toward ethnic cleansing, potentially even genocide. If you see some of the crimes that have been committed, both by the Ethiopian forces and also by the TPLF, there is really enormous concerns about the viability of Ethiopia as a country and its continue as a united republic. So I think it's one thing for Abiy to pretend that he's an emperor and is going to go to the battle, but I think what most people expect of him is to show the kind of leadership that is needed to really think about this in a mature way and realize that there's really no military victory at the moment, whether from the side of the TPLF or on the side of the government. And I think it would be tragic really for the conflict to get back to Addis Ababa. It would really destroy the economy of Ethiopia. It will affect the country in a very deep way. So there is really a need to urgently resolve this conflict peacefully.
Right, thank you. Dr. Hassan Kunenje.
It's very interesting, as Dr. Peter says, to watch what is happening actually in Ethiopia. One thing I would like to advise my brother Abiy Ahmed is, this is not 1907, it's not the Battle of Adwa, and you're not the Menelik II. You've did some great things. However, you won't be celebrated very much if you actually had to die on the front line, because chances are then your part will lose the war and will not get a chance to rewrite history. I think it is time for the combatants and the two parties involved, one led by TPLF and another one led by, of course, Abiy Ahmed's government, to come to some kind of a negotiating settlement in a way in which they're going to perhaps transition Ethiopia to a place that is going to be more peaceful. Now, one Ethiopia dream, it is something that is noble. I think many countries and many African countries were an amalgamation of many nations trying to make nation states, aspire to be one nation at some point. The challenge is that's not exactly the history that has been there for Ethiopia. It's been pretty much of the past a couple hundred years, composed of Tigray and Amhara aristocracy, and much of the last 30 years, it's been a Tigray aristocracy, by any sort of measure. And of course, part of the conflict is also, being inspired by the fact that suddenly they find themselves out of power and they're not very happy about it. But also because of, I think, what I'll call, while they may have been well-meaning, it's also a degree of naivete on the part of Abiy Ahmed to try perhaps to push some of these reforms a little bit too quickly and too fast. And so there is a blowback to that. Now, where do we go from here? It is critical that people start listening, and especially those who are leading the combatants, that there is no military solution to this. It's unlikely that either party is actually going to achieve total victory. I do not think TPLF and the allies have the capacity right now to actually rule Ethiopia. And if they were to take off Addis Ababa, it's going to be bloody and not anything that anyone wants to see, whether in the region or internationally. Now, Abiy Ahmed's control of Ethiopia has been irreparably damaged with regard to his ability to be able not just to enforce the rule of law, but to be able to get the kind of loyalty and legitimacy that's going to be required for a leader who leads a country of 115 million people. And that is why a negotiated settlement is a must. A ceasefire is critical and is urgent. It has to happen now. Outside that, I think both parties are actually lying to each other. And what we're going to see is a hurting stalemate that is going to cause massive humanitarian catastrophe that we have not seen in this region in recent years.
Indeed. Asungi, you hold on with that view as well, I can see.
Yes, there's no military solution to the conflict in Ethiopia. And I want to take you back a little bit. In your former station, I remember that was the time when the PM was elected, and there was a lot of jubilation, and he was I think in the panelist he was called the Obama of Africa because of the background of his parents. I mean, there was a lot of hula brara which I really didn't understand. And then he was prematurely, in my view, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This pales from the other candidates who received the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think the PM is not really a student of his own country's history. And wearing the military regalia and going to war is to me a sense, he's just showing a sense of desperation, really. What I think he needs to do, as my colleagues have said, he needs to sit down and speak, to talk to the parties in the conflict so that they can find a solution to the conflict in Ethiopia. I mean, the security of Ethiopia as a state has a huge impact to the whole region. So I think it is correct for the Republic of Kenya's intervention. We saw the president going there and trying to find a solution to the problem. The AU has been involved. So I think it's about time that we stop these sideshows and stick to the business of the Ethiopian people who really need peace. There's a lot of poverty in Ethiopia, and I think that should be the focus, the people of Ethiopia. And as my colleague said, there's already been documented a lot of human rights violations, commission of crimes, rape has been used as a weapon of war. All these things attract, these things are international crimes, and they attract the International Criminal Court's intervention. So I think it's time for a more peaceful solution to the Ethiopian conflict.
All right, Dr. Peter Biara-Jack, there is fear and trepidation right now that we are actually looking or Ethiopia is standing on the cusp of a genocide. And we can see there is African citizens who've raised this concern with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Actually, in a letter they wrote to him. I can just read an excerpt on that, and then you tell me, are we facing, yes, the specter of a genocide in Ethiopia, as it were? And it reads, this is African citizens' letter to the United Nations Secretary General on the risk of genocide in Ethiopia. And it says, we the undersigned, I cannot be able to read all the undersigned names there, write on behalf of ourselves, our members across the regions of African continent and the diaspora, and on behalf of concerned Africans and humanity everywhere, to request you to provide leadership in taking urgent measures to prevent imminent genocide in Ethiopia. Absent such actions, we believe that genocide is likely to happen under your watch as the Secretary General, which will be a blot, not merely on your record in that capacity, but also of our collective humanity at this time. To avert this, they continue to say, we urge you to initiate or take the following steps urgently. 1, work with the International Committee of the Red Cross to make inventories of all internment centers in Ethiopia and ensure access, monitoring, and oversight of conditions therein by ICRC. Deploy without further delay your special advisor on the prevention of genocide, Ms. Alice Neritu, on an urgent assessment mission into Ethiopia. Take steps in liaison with member states to convene a special session of Human Rights Council on Ethiopia. Secure a clear Security Council statement of commitment to the prevention of genocide in Ethiopia and authorization of measures to follow up on that commitment. And finally, provide a clear commitment by Secretary General to ensuring the prevention of genocide in Ethiopia. And of course, they hark back to the history of Rwanda, how it just nascently began as just a tribal war, but there was really slow off the mark in terms of intervening, and it blew up to be a genocide. We have our own Alice Neritu now, who took over as the representative there on Malta's genocide. Can we just give your reaction on this particular letter? Do you think it will move the needle, even a jot? Dr. Peter Biara-Jack.
I'm not sure if it will move the needle, to be very honest, because, we in South Sudan have dealt with Ethiopians for a very long time. When our war started in 1983, Ethiopia was the first country that provided us support militarily. The former regime of Mengistu Haile Mariam, and then when that regime was overthrown by the TPLF, the TPLF also worked with us in supporting us in our liberation struggle. So we know these sides very well. And one thing about Ethiopia is there is this sense of pride that sometimes is self-damaging. There is a pride, especially with these northern tribes of the Tigray and Amhara. There is this unwillingness to compromise, to acknowledge the other side and the views that the other side is pushing forward. Because we saw this thing unfolding in very slow motion when the differences was growing and when the lines were getting very stiff and each side was digging in for a conflict. And there was no sense of reaching for a national dialogue or anything like that. So that pride, I think, will block anything. And given the fact that Ethiopia, I don't think Ethiopia is a signatory to the Rome Statute of the ICC, in which case it would require a referral by the Security Council. And you know, for a very long time, month and month after the conflict began, the Security Council couldn't even come up with a statement on the conflict in Ethiopia. So I doubt if that will happen. But definitely there is a concern about growing genocide in Ethiopia. And I think for us, and especially for me, Abiy Ahmed has been quite irresponsible in his leadership and in his statement, the way in which he has spoken, in some of the decisions that he has allowed to be taken. And it just shows at the end, although he's kind of popular, he doesn't really have a real power. If you really analyze the situation now in Ethiopia and who is fighting the war for him, it's not really his people of Oromia, it's his maternal people of Amhara. It's really the Mekanan that is really the power now in Ethiopia that is fighting this war. It's mostly Amhara militia that are fighting this conflict, since the federal forces only exist in name and don't really have any capacity to match the ability of the TPLF. And if you've seen the executive, the state of emergency that was declared and how it is being implemented, ethnic Tigrayans are being rounded up everywhere. Even the ones that were part of peacekeeping mission in South Sudan were basically pulled out and dismissed from the military. And within Addis Ababa, civilians are being threatened, people's homes are being invaded, people are being rounded up, some are being killed. If you look at some of the rhetoric that is coming from the political and military leaders, it's basically saying that all the TPLF people are terrorists and all the Tigrayans have to be dealt with. This is very concerning. And although he may have some legitimate points that he wants to get through, the way in which he's talking about the conflict, the way in which the Amhara extremist forces are behaving is only making the situation concerning. And I'm really worried that Ethiopia may become sort of like the former Yugoslavia, that broken up into so many different countries.
Thank you.
So let me repeat myself again. It's really time for Abiy Ahmed to show leadership. Him going to the battlefield is not going to resolve anything. If anything at all, since even he gone to the battlefield, TPLF is actually gaining ground. It's not losing ground. It's just that it's moving very slowly.
Right.
And so, and a lot of young people that are not even properly trained. Some of these people are being trained for a few days or like a few weeks at most, and given to arms to go to the battlefields. And like even the celebrities that say that they're going to fight, they're not soldiers. These are civilians. And they are going there. They think, I don't know what is going on, but this is war. So there is really a need for leadership from the Prime Minister of Ethiopia.
Thank you.
To show the direction.
Thank you.
And also for the TPLF to show leadership and sit down and resolve this conflict peacefully before something tragic happens.
Right. If we keep our eyes peeled and look closely, there is more than meets the eye here, because we can see a very multi-layered situation, a confluence of factors that actually are operating in Ethiopia right now. We have proxy wars, and Ahmed Ash was just mentioning, interest of foreigners as well. But top of the agenda is many people are pointing towards also the Renaissance Dam, as it were, that also this could be another tinderbox that is waiting to explode, that this tension between Ethiopia and Egypt also is being actually instigated by proxy, not really proxy, but foreign agents who have interest in Ethiopia. And the waters that is interest in Egypt, and the waters are coming from the Nile, now will not be available in Egypt. Hashi, I can see you straining at the leash to actually answer that.
Debal, I think, with all due respect, that an ethno-analysis of the Ethiopian conflict does not give us any answers. What the Amhara do, what the Tigray do, or what the Afar do does not give us a sense of the political economy of Ethiopia and why we have civil strife. It might provide some supplementary answers, but it does not provide the core answers that we want to give the citizens of this region an understanding of the conflict. I think that people ought to understand that the TPLF was an Albanian communist-inspired organization that came to power through the gun by overthrowing the Mengistu regime. And it formed a coalition of ethnic groups called the EPRDF, and it was the leading coalition. So the very idea of balkanizing Ethiopia in the first place came from the TPLF. People forget that the TPLF has been in power for 30 years, that it has been a brutal dictatorship. It has not been democratic. It has overthrown civil and political rights in that country for a long time. When they came in on a promise of change. They became a worse dictatorship than the Mengistu. And when Mr. Abiy Ahmed came to power, it was like a spring in Ethiopia. Dr. Kanenja is absolutely right in saying that there was a northern aristocracy between the TPLF, Tigrays, and the Eritreans and the Amharas, who have writ large the concept of the nation of Ethiopia under them, while 100 million other Ethiopians have been outside that spectrum. I also don't think that Mr. Abiy is not in power. I think he's fully in charge. I think that if you look at the political coalition inside Ethiopia, it is only exclusive of the Tigrayan TPLF. While the rest of the people of Ethiopia fully support the government of Ethiopia. Now, there is no question as to who started this thing. The TPLF killed hundreds of soldiers in a camp in northern Ethiopia, and that's how the war started. Mr. Abiy had developed relations with Eritrea and brought peace between the two countries, where hundreds of thousands of people had died in the conflict in Badme. And so I suggest to you that I agree that there should be a ceasefire. I agree that there should be negotiations. I agree there should be a new constitutional dispensation based on one man, one vote. And I think that the only thing that can save Ethiopia is a multi-party constitutional government. Now, the other profound question that we have to ask ourselves as Africans in this region is whether or not we want secessionism to be the issues of the day in our region. So that if I disagree with the central government, if there's a conflict between the central government and the regions, every tribe and every nation puts up a flag and says, look, we're going to declare independence. This is not the way to go. If Ethiopia breaks down and we have 10 more states in the Horn of Africa, that will be a disaster. So what we have to concentrate in, what we have to concentrate in is see how is it that we can bring together the two parties through diplomacy in this region, and say, look, this is the roadmap to peace, and this is how we're going to give the Ethiopian people a chance to settle their own destiny and vote for a new system and a new horizon and a new way of life other than conflicts in Ethiopia.
Thank you, Hashi. And I think there is this morbid fear also with the Tigrayans that they're saying we don't want actually to be in power right now, but what we fear most is the fact that we are looking at the possibilities of our community, or the possibility of our community being exterminated, you know, like Hitler, the final solution. And Abiy is particularly intent to making sure that Tigrayans are exterminated, so they believe. And this is what I want to ask you, Dr. Hassan Khanenje. Do you think these fears are plausible, that now, as Ahmed Hashi is talking about cessation, they're actually gagging for cessation because they believe Abiy is out to exterminate them?
I'm not sure whether the intention is to exterminate the TPLF or the Tigray ethnicity, in part because I think it's important to understand that majority of Eritreans are actually of Tigray descent. And we know that in this current theater and conflict, Eritrea and Afewaki has actually been on the side of Abiy Ahmed. I think what may be of concern, I think, is what Dr. Peter raised earlier, that the rhetoric is not making it easy, and it can easily lead to ethnic cleansing. Now, it is important to remember that the Tigray only comprise about 6% of Ethiopia, or 6 million, which is about 5% actually of Ethiopia. And in case of genocide, it's much easier for the majority to actually eliminate the minority. And so they've developed, based partly on history and also how they came to power and how they ruled, a siege mentality that in in an event that they're not out of power, much like sometimes what happens with the state of Israel and, and even the Tutsis in Central Africa, that unless you are represented sufficiently in power, chances are the world is going to conspire against you, and you may not have any chance of survival. However, I think the fear that the rhetoric is leading to ethnic cleansing, which has been also supported by perhaps an appearance of what are seen as a purge of Tigray elements politically and from the military, that is not unfounded. It raises the specter and the possibility that, for instance, a lot of militias who are not under the central command may actually decide to act on their own and commit acts of ethnic cleansing. And that is something that I think the region and the world should not accept. However, I think both parties have a responsibility to ensure that this conflict comes to an end, because they have a role both in the origin and the genesis of the conflict, and they're going to have a role in its own resolution.
All right, so now we have Alice Nderitu, who is on as a special advisor of the prevention of genocide to the Secretary General at the UN right now, taking over Adama Jang. If I may remember, I cannot remember the exact name, but it was Adama Jang. I remember I interviewed him once. But do you think this particular office is making any discernible difference? Maybe just to wrap up on it, is it making any discernible difference? Do we hear the clarion calls from this particular office, from even Adama Jang and right now Alice Nderitu? Let's just put that question to Peter Ajak very briefly.
Well, you see, what is making things even more difficult is the stance that Abiy regime has taken against the presence of the UN organization in the country. As you remember, just last month, or was it a few weeks ago, 7 head of UN agencies in the country were made persona non grata and were kicked out of the country. And the Abiy regime has made things very difficult for the international actors to help, whether it is in peaceful resolution of the conflict or investigation of what actually happened, because you know very well when the war initially happened, the whole of Tigray was blocked out. You know, they cut the internet, they cut all the communications, so things were very difficult. So even if the UN entities wanted to do more, there is very limited exactly what they can do, and that is a concern. There is a point that I want to clarify, Duval, from Dr. Hashi. You see, there are now more information emerging about what was actually happening the day before the TPLF attacked the bases in the north. There are video footages now that emerge of events that happened on November 1st and 2nd, days before the TPLF made the move that it did, of Abiy Ahmed and Ethiopian forces giving weapons to the Eritrean government and the Eritrean army. And you wonder, what was that? And this is something that has been happening for months. As Dr. Kaneja mentioned, for months, Abiy Ahmed was basically purging Tigrayans from the military and security forces, to the extent that it actually broke the ability of the Ethiopian intelligence to function. In fact, I was in touch, and I mentioned to you before, we know these people very well on both sides. And I was in touch with a large number of former Tigrayan generals who were becoming more and more insecure, because the only way Abiy could manage Addis Ababa was to deploy intelligence agents from Eritrea inside Addis Ababa. And although they all speak Tigrinya, and they were allies in the previous civil war, we remember the war that happened between Eritrea and Ethiopia from 1998 to 2002. And at the end of that conflict, Fwerki became a sworn enemy of TPLF, and it was the same thing on both sides. So a lot of these people became quite uncomfortable, and they moved all to Mekele. And I think when you look at the part of the thing that people are fighting for in Ethiopia is the notion of federalism, and whether the regional governments have powers to do certain things without the involvement of the federal government. So the debate is a bit more complex than we are making it to appear. I'm not saying that both sides are clean here. There were opportunities for both sides to calm down before the war broke out and negotiate a solution. But that was not the choice that was made.
Thank you.
But at the end of the day, who is the leader?
Right.
The leader of the country is Abiy Ahmed, and the buck stopped with him. If he had chosen a different path, we would have been seeing a different reality than what we are seeing now. So
Thank
it's
you.
really not that simple blaming the TPLF. And when you're a small minority that have suffered for long, don't forget during the Derg regime of Mengistu Haile Mariam, that the whole force was basically deployed against the Tigrayans. And there was a lot of slaughter that happened. There's a lot of terrible memories that happened. So when they came to power, their first thought was how to protect themselves, because they know at some point they may lose power. So let's not forget that history.
Right. Allow us just to also slake our thirst a bit. We'll circle back, then we'll just give our closing remarks, because I can see we are pinched for time as well. So we take that short break. We circle back with a brief, of course, remarks from our panelists and wind up the show as well. Don't go away.